Coming up on this episode of DevelopSec, we talk about vulnerability disclosure and why it's important to you and your organization. Tackling the challenge to integrate security into the development process? Looking for insights, answers, and practical solutions to avoid getting overwhelmed? Welcome to DevelopSec Live, where our focus is your success in securing and improving development processes. And here's your host, James Jardine. Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of DevelopSec Live. Today I want to talk a little bit about vulnerability disclosure. Now this is different. Often people confuse vulnerability disclosure with bug bounties. Now I like to always point out right at the beginning that there is a difference between the two. Vulnerability disclosure, which we're going to talk about today, is really having a capability to be able to, if somebody finds an issue with your application, your web application, mobile application, whatever it may be, they have a clear path to be able to alert you about the issue so that way you get it in a timely manner and you're able to respond appropriately to it. Whereas a bug bounty has vulnerability disclosure by default because I have to have some way to be able to alert about the bounty. The big difference is though, is that with a bug bounty, you're actually going out and saying and specifying, hey, I'm willing to offer something in exchange for you to come and actually look at my site or my application to see if you can find vulnerabilities. And if you do and you report them to me, then I will go ahead and provide you with whatever it is reward that we've agreed upon. Sometimes it's just kudos, hey, thanks a lot, we'll put your name on our website. Other times it could be monetary rewards. In some cases, maybe it's product of some sort. Maybe you're getting maybe a free piece of whatever equipment that that organization provides or sells. So there's lots of different things when you do a bug bounty that are provided as incentives for somebody to come and look at your site and be able to assess it. And also with those incentives also comes permission to come across and do that. But we're not going to talk about bug bounties really besides that in this episode. What I want to talk about is the importance of vulnerability disclosure. Now, vulnerability disclosure is really our capability to say, hey, I've got a process in place to handle when somebody provides me information about a vulnerability in my website. It doesn't mean that you're promoting people to test your application. A lot of people get confused and they're afraid of doing vulnerability disclosure because they're afraid that that says, oh, hey, come hack my site. And if you find something, you can send it to me and, who knows what happens from then on. But that's not what it really means. What vulnerability disclosure means is that we've got a process in place, someplace that if somebody using the site or somebody comes across and they do find something and they want to share it with you, that it's an easy process on both their side and on your side. And that makes it really important. So we see in the news all the time, people going out, they find something on an application and they have no way to report it. So they come through, hey, I've got a bug, but how do I get this to the security group? Maybe there's only a means to get it to customer service or a tech support group, which oftentimes isn't the right place for some of these things to come in, because if they don't know how to handle those, then they may just kind of drop them off, they get lost, and it never makes it over to the appropriate division within the organization, and it gets dropped. And then somebody gets upset because, hey, I told you about this, you're not doing anything, you're ignoring me, I feel like what I've shared with you is getting no value. So, you know what? I guess I'll just go share this publicly. Maybe I'll share it on Twitter and call your organization out with that share. Say, hey, what's going on? How come you're not fixing this problem? And really blow it up and turn it into a really big deal, even though it may be something that's not that big of a deal, but something that could have been handled more smoothly if we have the right processes in place. So on the end user side, just having a very simple mechanism for somebody to be able to report these to the right area, whether that's having a security at your organization email address, so that way we know that those will make it to the security group, whether it's if it's supported up through customer service or some other mechanism like that, having a process to make sure that's going to get to the security group. is another big factor, but making it prominent. It doesn't have to be some banner that pops up on the screen that says, hey, if you find a security vulnerability, here's how you can report it. But, down at the bottom where you have your terms of service, your privacy policies, your contact us, have something on there that says, hey, if you identify something that you think is concerning, here's the best way to get that information to us. And in some cases, maybe you don't want just a regular email. Maybe you want a form input on your application, but maybe you want it to be encrypted when it gets traveled across. So maybe you have keys or certificates already set up to say, hey, here's my my public key. You can sign your emails or encrypt your emails using this, so that way when I get it, only we'll be able to read this. So that way we're protecting that data in transit, so that way other people may not be able to be in on whatever information you may be providing. Maybe it's not sensitive information. Maybe you just notice something wrong with the site and you want to share that information. I do that sometimes when I'm using a site as a regular user. Something happens that I feel probably shouldn't be. I mean, coming from a development background, you get a good idea of what should be happening, what shouldn't be happening. If something's happening out of the ordinary, sometimes you want to share that with people. I actually got on customer service with a site one time because the site wasn't working, and for some reason I wanted to look up something. None of the drop-down lists were loading, all that stuff, and so I chatted with their tech support. Their tech support was really good about saying, hey, you need to do this, and it just had to do with whether you were on www or just hitting the domain directly. And if you actually dig down into it, a big issue that they had was the way they were setting up things like content security policy and the way the domains were set up. But, you see stuff like this, you want to be able to share that because, hey, we're good citizens out here, right? We want to help make sure that your site's running okay. And if I can't use it, I want to at least make you aware. Maybe nobody else has noticed, or maybe there's something weird going on in my system that I can't do anything. So having a way to be able to know as an end user, this is how you can go about submitting this issue to us and letting us know. And then on the flip side, we have to have some mechanism, some processes in place on the organizational side to be able to handle this, to know, hey, how are we promoting this out there so people know this is how they can send us this information? But then how do we handle that information as it comes through? And this is one of the big things. When you talk about bug bounties, right, you see a lot of companies now that handle your bug bounties. So bug bounty management out there. So that way you don't have to worry as much about how to handle all the reports coming in and triaging them and seeing if they're valid or not valid and all this stuff. But again, when we do a bug bounty, you may have a lot more submissions because you're actively saying, hey, come hack my stuff and tell me what you're finding. And then we'll go ahead and we'll try to address those issues as we go. When we talk about vulnerability disclosure, we're not saying, hey, come hack our stuff. We're just saying, hey, if you find something, please share it with us and here's how you can do it. So we want to have some processes in place so that we know when a submission is provided, how we're going to react to it. So how are you going to handle when that information comes in? Do you have somebody that's going to look at it, give it kind of an initial analyzation, determine, hey, is this a real issue? Is this not really an issue? How does it rank internally? Now, again, this is an internal issue. When you get issues brought in, issues are a business risk. So the business has to assess them and understand, hey, where does this fall on our spectrum? But you receive it, you have to analyze it somehow, determine what you're doing, having a timeline. Hey, how quick are we going to respond? Are we going to respond? Hopefully you are, to at least say, hey, thank you for sending in this item. We're looking into it. It doesn't have to be overly detailed, but at least you're acknowledging the fact that you received the receipt of that report, making sure that they know that it didn't go into some black hole someplace, that the information that provided actually went somewhere. So we want to make sure that we're doing that. We want to make sure that we have a clear workflow going through. So if it's coming into customer service, how do we know to flag this as a security type incident and make sure that that gets routed over to the security group? Maybe it's coming in through a security at email address. So how do we make sure that that mailbox is being monitored appropriately and timely to make sure that we get these responses back? And then, of course, hey, if we actually end up finding that this is a real issue, we go through, we resolve it, having some way to at least write back and, have a thanks. Hey, thanks for reporting this. We went ahead, we resolved this issue. We really appreciate your assistance. Showing a little appreciation doesn't hurt these days. To say, hey, thanks for your time of actually submitting it. Because as an end user, it's easy to see something that's not right and just be like, whatever, and you just keep on going and don't submit it. But if you feel like your time was worth it, and it was actually appreciated that you shared that information and people actually looked at it and it was dealt with, then it makes it a little bit easier to want to do it the next time. And so I've seen a couple different situations where the security disclosure piece breaks down. So I had one organization that had this issue where they didn't have any way to appropriately disclose it. So somebody disclosed it through the customer service portal of sorts, through customer service email, whatever it may have meant. Anyway, it ended up in customer service. Well, customer service didn't know what to do with this info. Now, I don't know if they responded back with very inappropriate answers, and inappropriate being just wrong. I don't know how they responded back, but I know it didn't make it to the security group. It didn't make it to the development groups. So they were unaware that this information was provided. Well, of course, in some situations, if you don't respond back and the person that reports it feels like they're being ignored, they may start taking it out to Twitter or they take it out to social media. And this is where, now all of a sudden everybody knows about this issue. You start looking bad because, this person doesn't respond. I sent them this info trying to help them out, right? And it starts to give you kind of a bad reputation in this sense because it looks like you're not willing to work with people helping you out or trying to help you out in these situations. And so they ended up, I think they saw it through social media, and then they went back through and found out, hey, it went into customer service, and it just kind of got dropped there. It got lost in the customer service world. So we want to make sure that we don't get caught in those type of situations where we do get lost in that loop of, hey, it went to our customer service and it didn't go anywhere. So they've actually gone through and updated their processes to make it easier to make sure that these type of things don't slip through the cracks. Because some of these things may be minute. They may not be that big of a deal. But others may be a really big deal, and we need to get that information as soon as possible if people are willing to share that with us. So we want to make sure that we are figuring out processes internally to be able to handle that workflow going through there. The other case you have is, I just had this recently happen to me, asking questions of a security nature due to multi-factor and some limitations that this application or organization puts on the ability to use multi-factor across multiple applications or multiple accounts. You reach out to customer service and then, asking questions. This isn't even reporting vulnerabilities. It's, hey, I want clarification. I'm stuck here. I can't enable something because of the way your system is set up. How can we go about resolving this type of issue? Because my accounts are less secure right now because of this configuration. And then when you get people that respond back that don't really understand security, and if you know security, they don't understand security, they respond back and then you get frustrated. And you're like, well, wait a minute. Now I'm getting all upset because we can't do things according to how things really should be. What best practice are you using that's allowed you to decide to do things a certain way? And it takes multiple emails to get a valid response back as to why it was that the system worked as it did. And unfortunately, I still don't like how the system works as it does. I wouldn't agree with how they've set that up, but the way it's set up, at least I finally got an answer. But it took, over 11 days to actually get a legitimate response to my question. And so as my frustration is mounting because I can't enable two-factor authentication on both of my accounts, I can only enable it on one of my accounts, this causes a lot of angst, right? And the end user starts getting really frustrated. And sometimes in those situations, they'll start taking it out and people get very loud about things. And as an organization, we don't want that really to happen, right? We don't want our name smeared across social media as, hey, we've got these big problems, because most of the time the big problems are portrayed as much bigger than they really are. We'd rather take care of these in a more professional manner and be able to deal with it right away. Of course, this can be difficult because if you don't have a high staff resource volume going on to be able to handle this, if you have a lot of these things coming in, that can be pretty difficult to take care of. The good news is when we just do vulnerability disclosure, we're not doing a bug bounty. When we're just doing disclosure, then all we're saying is, hey, I'm not promoting people to come out and hack my site. I'm not inviting people to come do it. All I'm saying is if somebody finds something, Joe Blow's out there using the site, he happens to put in a single quote into one of the fields because his, the word, he's got O'Reilly in it. So it's got a single quote in it. And all of a sudden it comes back with an error message and an error message regarding SQL. Well, at that point, that is not somebody trying to attack your site. It's just somebody using the site and the site broke. But it happens to also be a security risk. So they're going to send that information over to you, and you have to have some way to be able to take that information in from start to finish and be able to process that. And that's what we're looking for with vulnerability disclosure. And this is something that everybody should have. If you've got a website, you should have some way for people to be able to report in any type of security issues they see. If you've got mobile applications, a way for people to be able to report this stuff, and then not only just a way to report it, but have some sort of process laid out of, hey, this is how we're going to receive it. This is how it's going to get routed to security. This is how we're going to analyze it. These are the time frames that we're looking to keep within. And you can make that apparent. Hey, put out there. You can submit your security bugs here. We try to respond to them within 24 hours or 48 hours, whatever it is. But at least it's indicating that you're looking at it, you're going to assess it, and then you have the processes in place to be able to respond back and say, hey, thanks for the report. We're currently working on this and moving forward from that stance. That's what we want to do when we talk about vulnerability disclosure. But the biggest thing I want to point out from that is don't confuse vulnerability disclosure with bug bounty. I feel like a lot of people avoid disclosure policies because they feel like that's opening themselves up and saying, hey, we're doing a bug bounty now. We don't want to do bug bounties. No, bug bounty is a completely different thing. Vulnerability disclosure is something that everybody should have. So that way, if anybody finds anything, there's an easy, clear path for them to report it, for you to receive it, and to ride that out through the entire process. So hopefully that clears up a little bit about vulnerability disclosure and, that compared to bug bounties as what we're looking at and why we should have vulnerability disclosure policies in place and procedures and processes to make sure that the transactions that come in happen smoothly and we keep everybody happy. If we make the process simple, people will be more apt to flow through it and help us out and provide that information. So I appreciate everybody listening and tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next episode.